Don't be lazy when it comes to setting goals. Because what you neglect to design, life will design for you, and it rarely designs in your favor. You see, goals are not just about achievement. They are about direction. A man or woman without goals is like a ship without a destination, busy moving, but going nowhere meaningful. And the tragedy is not that people aim too high and miss. The tragedy is they aim too low and hit. Laziness in goal setting is subtle. It doesn't always look like doing nothing. Sometimes it looks like saying, I'll figure it out later. Sometimes it sounds like, let me just get through today. But days turn into weeks, weeks into years, and suddenly you wake up living a life you never consciously chose. You must understand this. Goals are the foundation of a disciplined life. If you don't set them, you drift. And drifting is the most dangerous form of living because it feels comfortable until it's too late. Now here's the powerful truth: setting goals is an act of self-respect. When you sit down and decide what you want, you are telling yourself, my life has value, my time has meaning, my future deserves intention. That's not small thinking, that's the beginning of transformation. But don't just set any goals. Set goals that pull you, goals that stretch you, goals that demand you become more than you are today. Because the real benefit of setting goals is not what you get, it's who you become. You might set a goal to earn more money, but in the process you become more disciplined, more focused, more resourceful. You might set a goal to improve your health, but along the way, you develop consistency, self-control, and strength. So the goal is not the destination, the goal is the journey of growth. Now let's talk about responsibility. You cannot blame your circumstances if you refuse to define your direction. You cannot complain about your results if you are unclear about your targets. Life responds to clarity. When you know what you want, your decisions change, your habits change, your standards rise. But if you are lazy in setting goals, you remain casual, and living in a casual life produces accidental results. And here's something else: hope is not a strategy. Wishing is not a plan. You don't get what you hope for, you get what you plan for. So take the time, think deeply, ask yourself, what do I want for my life? What kind of person do I want to become? What must I change starting today? Write it down, not in your head on paper, because a goal not written is merely a wish. And once it's written, don't hide from it. Look at it every day. Let it remind you. Let it challenge you. Let it guide your actions. Now, will it be easy? Number. But easy is not what builds a meaningful life. Discipline does. Clarity does. Purpose does. And the beautiful part is this: you don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to start. One clear goal, one committed step, one disciplined action repeated daily. Over time, those small steps turn into massive results. So don't be lazy in setting goals. Be intentional. Be bold. Be decisive. Because your future is not something you wait for, it is something you design. And the moment you take control of your goals is the moment you take control of your life. When a person becomes careless or lazy in setting goals, they may miss out on opportunities and miss out on personal growth. Something very subtle but very dangerous begins to happen in their life. They stop directing their future and start reacting to it. At first, it doesn't feel like a problem. In fact, it often feels comfortable. There is no pressure, no responsibility, no urgency. But this comfort is deceptive, because what seems like peace is actually the beginning of drift. Life without clear goals doesn't remain still. It moves, but in whatever direction circumstances push it. And circumstances are never loyal to your dreams. They are influenced by other people's decisions, by environment, by chance opportunities, by sudden problems, and by distractions that have no respect for your future. When you are not intentional about your direction, you slowly surrender your steering wheel to forces that do not care about your destination. This is how drift begins. Not with a dramatic failure, but with small, unnoticed delays. You delay setting goals. You delay writing plans. You delay making decisions about what truly matters. You tell yourself, I'll figure it out later, or right now is not the right time. But later never arrives on its own. Time continues moving, and without noticing, months pass, then years, and suddenly you look back and realize that life has been lived but not designed. The most dangerous part of drift is that it does not feel like failure at first. A drifting person can still work, earn, eat, sleep, and stay busy. From the outside, everything can appear normal. But inside, there is no clear direction, no sense of progress, no alignment between effort and purpose. The person is active, but not intentional. Productive in motion, but not in. Meaning, when goals are not set, priorities become random. And when priorities are random, energy gets scattered. You start doing many things, but none of them lead you somewhere significant. You may find yourself chasing temporary pleasures, short-term distractions, or whatever feels urgent in the moment. But urgency is not the same as importance. And a life driven by urgency alone eventually becomes exhausted and unfulfilled. Another hidden effect of not setting goals is that standards slowly decline. When you don't define what you are aiming for, you also stop defining what you will not accept. Over time, you begin to accept less from yourself, less discipline, less focus, less effort. Not because you decided to lower your standards, but because you never clarified what high standards looked like in the first place. Without a clear target, even low performance starts to feel acceptable. And perhaps the most painful consequence is this. One day you wake up and realize you have been busy for years, but not truly progressing. You have been moving, but not ascending. You have been working, but not building. You have been existing, but not becoming. This is why drift is so dangerous that steals time quietly. It doesn't announce itself, doesn't warn you. It simply uses your lack of direction as permission to take you wherever life happens to go. But here is the truth that can change everything. No one drifts into a meaningful life. A meaningful life is always the result of intention. It is always built by people who took responsibility for their direction early, who refused to leave their future to chance, and who decided that every day must move them closer to something meaningful. Even a small amount of clarity can begin to reverse drift. The moment you decide, this is what I want, you begin to take back control. The moment you define a direction, even imperfectly, you stop being completely shaped by external circumstances. You start responding instead of just reacting. And that shift, small as it seems, is the beginning of personal power, because direction gives meaning to effort. Without direction, effort feels exhausting. With direction, even struggle feels purposeful. When you know where you are going, challenges become part of the journey instead of signs to quit. Obstacles become training, not punishment. Time becomes valuable, not wasted. So the real danger is not that people fail. The real danger is that they never clearly decide what success means for them. And without that decision, life quietly fills in the blanks. That is why goal setting is not just a productivity habit. It is a form of protection. It protects your time from being wasted. It protects your energy from being scattered. It protects your life from being lived by accident. Because if you do not define your life, something else will. And once that happens, it becomes very difficult to reverse the direction of drift. The good news is that it can be changed at any moment, but only through decision. Not wishful thinking, not waiting, but deciding. When a person takes the time to set clear goals, they are more likely to achieve their objectives and reach their full potential. Something powerful begins to happen at a deeper level of their identity. They start to define themselves instead of being defined by circumstances. Most people go through life reacting to what happens around them, but a person with goals begins to shape what happens around them. This shift is not just practical, it is psychological and deeply transformational. Goals are not simply statements of desire. They are declarations of direction. When you set a goal, you are not just saying, I want something. You are saying, this is the kind of life I intend to build, and this is the kind of person I am committed to becoming. That single act of clarity separates intention from confusion and purpose from randomness. Without goals, identity becomes unstable. A person starts depending on external validation to feel valuable. One day they feel successful because something went well, and the next day they feel lost because something went wrong. Their sense of self rises and falls with circumstances. But when goals are clearly defined, identity becomes anchored. The person begins to think, I know what I am working toward. I know what I stand for. I know what I am building. That internal clarity creates emotional stability and mental strength. One of the most important truths about goal setting is that it does not only shape outcomes, it shapes identity through repetition. Every goal you set begins to influence your daily decisions. And those daily decisions slowly sculpt your character. For example, if your goal requires discipline, you begin to act more disciplined. If your goal requires learning, you start to value knowledge more. If your goal requires patience, you begin to develop emotional control. Without realizing it, your goals are training your identity through action. This is why successful people often say they are not just chasing results, they are becoming someone. Because the real transformation happens in the process, not just at the finish line. The goal is simply the direction, the journey is the development of character. When goals are unclear or absent, identity becomes passive. A person begins to adapt to whatever environment they are in. Around hard-working people, they feel motivated. Around lazy environments, they become lazy. Around ambitious people, they feel inspired. But none of this is stable because it is not coming from within. It is borrowed energy, and borrowed energy never lasts. But when goals are clear, something changes internally. You stop asking, what is everyone else doing? And start asking, what do I need to do to move closer to my goal? That shift is subtle but powerful. It moves you from comparison to direction, and comparison weakens identity while direction strengthens it. Another important aspect is that goals give meaning to struggle. Without goals, difficulty feels like suffering. But with goals, difficulty becomes part of growth. A person who knows where they are going can endure more because they understand why they are enduring it. Pain becomes temporary, but purpose becomes permanent in their mind. This is why two people can face the same challenge, yet respond completely differently. One feels defeated while the other feels developed. The difference is not the challenge, it is the clarity of identity shaped by goals. When you set goals, you also begin to see yourself differently. You stop identifying as someone who is trying and start identifying as someone who is becoming. That shift in language matters more than most people realize, because how you define yourself internally determines how consistently you show up externally. Even small goals have this effect. A simple goal like waking up earlier, improving a skill, or managing time better begins to send a message to your mind, I am someone who improves, and once that identity is established, it becomes easier to maintain discipline in other areas of life. Identity begins to reinforce behavior, and behavior reinforces identity. Over time, goals build self-respect. Not because everything becomes easy, but because you begin to see evidence that you can trust yourself. Each time you follow through on a goal, you strengthen a silent agreement within yourself, I do what I say I will do. That internal trust is one of the strongest foundations of confidence a human being can develop. Without goals, that trust slowly weakens. Promises made to yourself are broken quietly. Plans are postponed repeatedly. And eventually a person begins to doubt their own ability to follow through. That self-doubt is not sudden, is the result of repeated lack of direction and commitment. But with clear goals, every small action becomes meaningful. Even ordinary days start to feel important because they are connected to something bigger. You are no longer just going through time, you are building something with time. And that sense of building changes everything. You start respecting your time more. You start choosing your habits more carefully. You start becoming more intentional in conversations, decisions, and routines. Not because someone forced you, but because your goals have shaped your identity. In the end, goal setting is not just about achievement, it is about identity creation. It is about deciding who you are becoming and then aligning your actions with that decision every single day. And the more consistent that alignment becomes, the more powerful and stable your identity grows. When a goal is written down, something very important changes in the human mind. It moves from imagination into structure. A thought inside your mind is fragile. It can change easily, fade quickly, or be influenced by emotions. But the moment you write it, it becomes something more real, more permanent, and more accountable. Writing a goal is not just a record-keeping action, it is a declaration of seriousness. Most people think about what they want in life, but very few people ever convert those thoughts into written clarity. And because of that, their desires remain scattered, inconsistent, and emotionally driven. A written goal, however, forces the mind to slow down and become specific. It demands clarity. It removes confusion. It transforms someday I want this into, this is what I am working toward. There is a psychological shift that happens when something is written. The brain begins to treat it differently. It is no longer just an idea floating in the background of thoughts, it becomes a reference point. Something you can return to, evaluate, and measure yourself against. And this creates accountability even if no one else is watching. One of the biggest problems people face is mental noise. They have too many ideas, too many desires, too many distractions competing for attention. Writing goals helps reduce that noise. It forces prioritization. It says this matters more than that. And once priorities are clear, decision-making becomes easier. Without written goals, every option feels equally important. And that leads to confusion, hesitation, and delay. But when goals are written, clarity begins to guide behavior. You no longer have to rely only on motivation. You can rely on structure. On paper, your goals remain stable even when your emotions change. This is extremely important because human emotions are not consistent. Some days you feel motivated, other days you don't. But a written goal remains the same every day, quietly reminding you of what you decided when your thinking was clear. This is why writing goals is an act of discipline, not just organization. It is choosing clarity over confusion. It is choosing direction over distraction. It is choosing responsibility over randomness. Another powerful effect of written goals is that they create visibility. What is visible becomes harder to ignore. A goal kept only in the mind can easily be forgotten during a busy day. But a written goal can be placed where you see it repeatedly on a notebook, on a wall, on your phone. And each time you see it, it pulls your attention back to what truly matters. It interrupts unnecessary behavior and redirects focus. This repeated exposure slowly reshapes habits. You begin to make decisions differently, not because someone is forcing you, but because your written goals are constantly reminding you of your direction. Even small choices how you spend your time, what you focus on, what you avoid start aligning with what you have written. Writing goals also turns vague dreams into measurable targets. A dream says, I want to be successful. A written goal says, this is what success looks like for me, and this is the time frame I am working within. That difference is crucial, because what cannot be measured cannot be managed, and what cannot be managed often remains unfinished. Once a goal is written, progress becomes visible. You can track it, you can evaluate it, you can adjust your actions based on it. This creates a feedback loop: action, reflection, improvement. Without written goals, this loop is weak or non-existent. People move through life without clear checkpoints, and as a result, they often feel busy but not necessarily productive. There is also an emotional effect. Written goals build commitment. When you write something down, you are making a silent promise to yourself. And every time you look at it, that promise is reinforced. Over time, this strengthens self-trust. You begin to see yourself as someone who follows through, someone who is serious about their direction. And self-trust is one of the most valuable forms of confidence. Not the kind of confidence that depends on external validation, but the kind that comes from internal consistency. When you consistently act in alignment with what you have written, you build a strong internal identity that says, I do what I say I will do. Without written goals, it becomes easy to break promises to yourself without even noticing. You think about things, you intend things, but there is no structure holding those intentions in place. And over time, that weakens discipline. Not because a person lacks ability, but because there is no system reinforcing commitment. Writing goals also reduces procrastination. When something exists only as a thought, it can be postponed endlessly. But when it is written, it feels more immediate. It becomes harder to justify delay. The clarity of the written word exposes avoidance. It creates gentle pressure that encourages action. Another important benefit is focus. In a world full of distractions, focus is not natural, it must be created. Written goals act as anchors for attention. When distractions arise, they bring you back to what you have already decided is important. Instead of reacting to every impulse, you begin to respond based on direction. Over time, this practice builds momentum. Small actions aligned with written goals accumulate, and what starts as simple clarity on paper gradually turns into real-world results. The transformation is not sudden, but it is consistent, and consistency is what produces lasting success. In the end, writing goals is not about paperwork or planning it is about taking responsibility for your life in a tangible form. It is about turning thought into structure, intention into direction, and desire into commitment. And once that shift happens, everything else in life begins to organize itself around what you have chosen to write. Discipline and goal setting is what transforms ordinary intentions into extraordinary outcomes. Many people can feel inspired for a moment, and many can even think deeply about what they want in life. But very few develop the consistency required to turn those thoughts into reality. And the difference between those who achieve meaningful success and those who remain stuck is not intelligence or opportunity alone, it is discipline applied consistently to clearly defined goals. At its core, discipline is the ability to do what needs to be done, even when you do not feel like doing it. And when discipline is tied to goals, it becomes purposeful rather than mechanical. Without goals, discipline feels like effort without meaning. But with goals, discipline becomes directed energy. Every small action becomes part of a larger vision, and that vision gives strength to continue even when motivation fades. One of the most important truths about life is that motivation is temporary, but discipline is stable. Motivation rises and falls based on emotions, environment, and external influence. Some days you feel powerful, focused, and ready to conquer everything. Other days you feel tired, distracted, or uncertain. If your progress depends only on motivation, your progress will always be inconsistent. But when discipline is built around goals, your actions no longer depend on how you feel, they depend on what you have decided. This is where transformation begins. A disciplined person with clear goals does not ask, do I feel like doing this today? Instead, they ask, does this action move me closer to what I have already decided? That simple shift changes everything. Life stops being emotional decision-making and starts becoming intentional execution. Discipline and goal setting also creates structure in life. Without structure, time becomes scattered. Hours are spent on things that feel urgent but are not important. Days pass in activity but not in progress. But when goals are clearly defined, discipline organizes time. It gives each day a sense of direction. Even ordinary routines begin to carry meaning because they are connected to something bigger than the present moment. Over time, this structure builds momentum. Small disciplined actions repeated daily start to compound. What seems insignificant in a single day becomes powerful over weeks, months, and years. A person who studies consistently for 1 hour a day may not see immediate dramatic change, but over time, that discipline transforms their knowledge, confidence, and capability. The same applies to health, finances, relationships, and personal development. Discipline turns small efforts into large results through repetition. But discipline is not only about action, it is also about resistance. It is the ability to resist distractions that pull you away from your goals. In today's world, distractions are everywhere. Entertainment, social comparison, instant gratification, and endless information compete for attention every second. Without discipline, attention becomes fragmented. And when attention is fragmented, progress slows down significantly. Goals act as filters for discipline. They help you decide what deserves your energy and what does not. When you are clear about what you want, it becomes easier to say no to things that do not align with your direction. This ability to say no is one of the most powerful forms of discipline. Because every time you say no to distraction, you are saying yes to your future. Another important aspect of disciplined goal setting is emotional control. There will always be moments of frustration, doubt, and delay. Progress is rarely linear. There are times when effort does not immediately produce results, and that is where most people give up. But discipline allows a person to continue even when results are not visible yet. It builds patience. It builds resilience. It builds trust in the process. A disciplined person understands that success is not created in moments of excitement, but in moments of consistency. It is not the big decisions made occasionally that shape a life, but the small decisions made daily. Waking up on time, staying focused when distracted, continuing when tired, these are the actions that build a strong foundation over time. Discipline also strengthens self-image. Every time you follow through on a goal-related action, you reinforce a positive identity. I am someone who stays committed. And every time you break discipline, you weaken that identity slightly. Over time, this internal identity becomes either a source of strength or a source of doubt. That is why disciplined goal setting is not just about external results, it is about internal transformation. When discipline becomes a habit, life becomes less chaotic and more intentional. You no longer feel like you are constantly reacting to circumstances. Instead, you begin to feel in control of your direction. Even when challenges arise, disciplined individuals do not lose their sense of purpose easily because they are anchored to something greater than temporary discomfort. It is also important to understand that discipline does not mean perfection. It means consistency. There will be days when energy is low, when progress is slow, when mistakes happen. But discipline is the ability to return to your goals again and again, regardless of setbacks. It is not about never failing, it is about never quitting. And over time, this consistency creates transformation that others may see as talent or luck. But in reality, it is simply disciplined action repeated long enough to produce visible results. What looks like sudden success is usually the outcome of invisible discipline practiced over a long period of time. In the end, disciplined goal setting builds a future that is not accidental but intentional. It ensures that your time, energy, and effort are not wasted on randomness but invested in direction. And when discipline and goals work together, they create a powerful combination that gradually reshapes your life, your identity, and your future into something meaningful and lasting. In conclusion, discipline in goal setting is not just a habit, it is the foundation of a meaningful and successful life. Goals give you direction, but discipline gives you the power to stay on that direction, even when motivation disappears, challenges arise, or results take time. Without discipline, goals remain ideas. With discipline, they become reality. Every great achievement is built on small, repeated actions that were done consistently, not occasionally. It is discipline that turns ordinary days into productive ones and simple efforts into powerful long-term results. It is discipline that keeps you moving when emotions say stop, and it is discipline that keeps you focused when distractions try to pull you away. When you combine clear goals with strong discipline, you can achieve great things. You create a life of purpose instead of accident, progress instead of confusion, and growth instead of stagnation. You stop reacting to life and start designing it. And slowly, through consistent effort, you become the person you once only dreamed of becoming. So the real message is simple but powerful. Set your goals with clarity and protect them with discipline. Because in the end, it is not what you wish for that shapes your life, it is what you consistently work for.